negotiations continue amendments. Meanwhile, the U.S. House coming in today at 2 p.m., a couple of bills, including one that would end the HAMP program, the Homeowner Assistance Program. You can follow House coverage on C-SPAN this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern. Now live to the Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who has made and preserved us as a nation, make our lawmakers people of high vision and steadfast fidelity to your wisdom. Use them to lift the banner of righteousness which exalts a nation. As they work together, deepen their understanding of one another's perspectives so that they will treat their colleagues as they would want their colleagues to treat them. Purge them from all that blemishes, corrupts, and defiles our common life. Heal our land, Lord, and use our senators as agents of your healing. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., March 29, 2011. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Jean Shaheen, a senator from the state of New Hampshire, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
We have the first half up. Madam President.
The Majority Leader.
Following any leader remarks will be a period of morning business for an hour, with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each. Majority controlling the first half, Republicans controlling the final half. Following morning business, Senate will resume consideration of S-493, the Small Business Jobs Bill. The Senate will recess from 12:30 until 2:15 to allow for weekly caucus meetings. Roll call votes in relation to amendments to the Small Business Jobs Bill are possible today. Senators will be notified when votes are scheduled. Madam President, we have 10 amendments now pending. I spoke yesterday afternoon to the Republican leader, and I think we're in good shape now to hopefully resolve the 1099 matter this afternoon. We're looking forward to having a consent agreement that we can vote on that. And I think we're at a point where in the morning we can vote on the McConnell amendment dealing with EPA and a couple of other amendments relating to EPA to get rid of that issue one way or the other. There are other matters with the bill that we would like to set up votes, and if people are willing to allow us to do that, we could do some of those this afternoon. But I think we're making progress on this very important bill. With all the amendments being offered, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that this bill we have has been led by Senators Landrieu and Snowe is an extremely important bill for creating jobs with small businesses. It's an innovation bill, and the programs that this bill covers has done some tremendously important things for the country. With the CR, I spoke with the White House this morning. There's conversations going with the White House and the Republican leadership in the House, and I think that this matter, with a little bit of good fortune, could move down the road in the next day or two to get us to a point where we can have something done so there doesn't have to be a government shutdown. I certainly hope that's the case.
Madam President.
The Republican leader.
As lawmakers returned to Washington this week, we did so against the backdrop of many world crises, from recovery efforts in Japan to battles everywhere from Afghanistan to Libya to an unfolding economic crisis in Europe. The scope and intensity of world events in recent months has been nothing short of breathtaking. Yet in the middle of all this, it's important that we not lose sight of the struggles and concerns of so many around us here at home. At a time when roughly 1 in 4 American homeowners owes more money on their mortgage than their home is worth, at a time when nearly 1 in 10 working Americans is looking for a job, at a time when the federal debt has reached heights that none of us could have even imagined just a few years ago, now is not the time to focus on the paramount issue on the minds of Americans every day. And that's the very real crisis that we face when it comes to jobs. Americans look around them and they see neighbors and friends struggling to find work. And yet all they seem to get from the White House are policies that handcuff small businesses with burdensome new regulations and red tape, and that create even more uncertainty about the future, including the administration's inexplicable and inexcusable inaction on trade deals that would level the playing field with our competitors overseas. And they're tired of it. Americans are tired of the White House paying lip service to their struggles while quietly promoting effort after effort, either through legislation or through some backdoor regulation that makes it harder, not easier, for businesses to create new jobs. But the administration really outdid itself last week when the President told the Brazilian President that the United States hopes to be a major customer in the market for oil that Brazilian businesses plan to extract from new oil finds off the Brazilian coast. You can't make this stuff up. Here we've got the administration, excuse me, we've got the administration looking for just about any excuse it can find to lock up our own energy resources here at home, even as it's applauding another country's efforts to grow its own economy and create jobs by tapping into its energy sources. For 2 years, the administration has canceled dozens of oil and gas leases all across America. It's raised permit fees. It's shut down deep-water drilling in the Gulf. It won't even allow a conversation about exploring for oil in a remote 2,000-acre piece of land in northern Alaska that experts think represents one of our best opportunities for a major oil find. And it continues to press for new regulation through the Environmental Protection Agency that would raise energy costs for every business in America and lead to untold lost jobs for more American workers. In other words, in the midst of average gas prices approaching $4 a gallon, and a chronic jobs crisis. The White House plans to make the climate for job growth worse. And that's why Republicans, led here in the Senate by Senator Inhofe, have proposed legislation to prevent this new energy tax from ever taking effect without congressional approval. The Wall Street Journal has called the amendment we're proposing, quote, one of the best proposals for growth and job creation to make it onto the Senate docket in years. Our amendment would assure small businesses across the country that they won't be hit with yet another costly new job-stifling burden by Democrats here in Washington. It will give voters the assurance that a regulation of this kind, which would have a dramatic impact on so many, could not be approved without their elected representatives standing up and actually voting for it. And at a time of rising energy prices, it would prevent Democrats in Washington from adding even more pressure to energy prices than they already have out of fealty to special interests that would rather we buy our energy from overseas than find and use the bountiful resources that we already have right here at home. So I want to thank Senator Inhofe once again for leading us on this issue. His bill, upon which my amendment is based, has 43 co-sponsors. He deserves the credit. He has been a fierce and tireless advocate not only for American energy, but also against new EPA regulations that would sidestep the legislative process. I thank him for his work, along with the great work that Senators Murkowski and Barrasso have done in educating the American people about these issues. At a time when Americans are looking for answers on the economy, this amendment is as good as it gets from Washington. By voting for it, we'd be saying no to more regulations and red tape, and we'd be saying yes to American job creators and to the jobs they want to create. I would urge my colleagues in both parties to support it.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the final half.
I suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
U.S. Senate starting the day with general speeches. About 11 Eastern, they will continue debate on a small business bill which contains innovation funds for small tech, small high-tech and research firms. A number of amendments are pending today, many of them unrelated to the bill, as negotiations continue off the floor over how to handle those unrelated amendments. And the Senate will be in today until 12:30. They'll take their regular Tuesday break for their party caucus lunches and back at 2:15 Eastern. The Senate hearing we want to tell you about today, it's underway in the Energy Committee, an oversight hearing looking at the reactor in Japan, the Fukushima reactor in Japan, and U.S. reaction to that. That is live now on C-SPAN. And in a related story, there's word this morning the President will deliver a speech on energy. The White House saying the President on Wednesday will outline his plans for the nation's energy security during a speech at Georgetown University. That's coming up Wednesday. We don't know the time yet. Obviously, we will keep you posted.
Madam President.
Senator from New York.
Thank you, Madam President. And I rise to speak on the current state of the bipartisan budget negotiations. For weeks now, the offices of the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker, and the White House have been engaged.
The Senator should know that the Senate is in a quorum call.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. And I rise to speak on the current state of the bipartisan budget negotiations. For weeks now, the offices of the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker, and the White House have been engaged in serious talks seeking a long-term budget agreement. It's been a long, hard process. There have been a lot of fits and starts in the negotiations. But it's no exaggeration to say that as of last week, talks were on a smooth path toward a compromise. The Speaker's office was negotiating in good faith. The party significantly narrowed the $51 billion gap on how much spending should be cut. House Republican leaders had agreed to come down from H.R. 1 and meet us halfway. We could begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But suddenly, at the end of last week, the House Republicans did a strange thing. They pulled back from the talks. They changed their minds about what level of spending cuts they could accept. We were right on the verge of a potential breakthrough, and they suddenly moved the goalposts. We felt a little bit like we were left at the altar. And not only did they abandon the talks, they started denying that they were ever close to a deal in the first place. Majority Leader Cantor issued a statement Friday saying that reports that progress were being made were far-fetched. It was like they decided that even the appearance of a looming compromise was a political liability. It was surreal. It's no surprise what happened. The headline of today's story in national journals says it all, quote, "With revolt brewing, GOP backs off deal." Let me repeat that, because that is really what's going on here and the news of the day in the last few days. With revolt brewing, said the headline, GOP backs off deal. The story reads, quote, "Concerned about a revolt by conservative Tea Party wing of the party, GOP leaders have pulled back from a tentative deal to cut roughly $30 billion in cuts from current spending levels. The influence that Tea Party conservatives now exercise over the process put the chances of a compromise seriously in doubt." The story continues, Madam President. Quote, "The GOP pulled back from that agreement last week after Majority Leader Eric Cantor and Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy warned House Speaker John Boehner that the deal would trigger a revolt from Tea Party conservatives." So in other words, as soon as House Republican leaders took one step towards compromise, the Tea Party rebelled, so they took 2 steps back. The National Journal story describes an offer that was put on the table by the White House that would have met the House Republicans halfway. The offer falls squarely in the ballpark of Congressman Ryan's original budget proposal, with roughly $70 billion in spending cuts compared to the President's budget request. This is a significant move in the Republicans' direction. These are more cuts than many on our side might support. But it shows how seriously the White House is about wanting a compromise to avert a shutdown. If they are planning to reject such an offer, then it's clear they won't take yes for an answer and are seeking a shutdown. The Republican leadership in the House, with the Tea Party breathing down their back, won't take yes for an answer and won't support the original proposal made by Budget Chairman Ryan of roughly $70 billion in spending cuts. And we know that Congressman Ryan is hardly a liberal or a moderate. So it shows you how far to the right the Republican leadership is being forced to move by the Tea Party. This level of spending cuts was good enough for House Republicans earlier this year when Hal Rogers released his original proposal, but the Tea Party hollered and House Republicans were forced to double their proposed spending cuts to an extreme level of $61 billion. When that happened, even Hal Rogers said the House was moving beyond what was reasonable and into territory where they could never get a deal. Tom Latham of Iowa agreed that in forcing H.R. 1 to go from $30 billion to $60 billion in cuts, the Tea Party was forcing Republicans to go beyond what was, quote, enactable. These are conservative Republicans saying that the present House proposal is not enactable, cannot pass. Just as the Tea Party forced mainstream Republicans into extreme territory before, they are doing it again. And anyone who looks at this objectively sees that's what's happening. The Speaker has said all along he wants to avoid a shutdown at all costs. And, Madam President, I believe him. He's a good man. The problem is a large percentage of those in his party don't feel the same way. They think compromise is a dirty word. They think taking any steps to avert a shutdown would mean being the first to blink. So Speaker Boehner is caught between a shutdown and a hard place. He's caught a tiger by the tail in the form of the Tea Party. There is even a Tea Party rally planned for later this week to pressure the Speaker not to budge off H.R. 1. To try and mask the divisions on their own side, the Republicans have resorted to lashing out in a knee-jerk way at Democrats. Their latest trick is trying to accuse Democrats of not having our own plan. That's a diversion. It rings hollow. The only proposals that have been made that would actually avoid a government shutdown are numerous compromises that Democrats have offered Republicans. And I'd like to remind my House friends, as you all know, the Senate needs 60 votes to pass a bill. We can't pass anything without Republican agreement. Yet our Senate Republican colleagues are nowhere to be found. Since the Senate rejected the Republican job-killing budget proposal that would cost Americans 700,000 jobs a month ago, Republicans have not moved an inch off their plan. Speaker Boehner knows when it comes to averting a government shutdown on April 8th, it is the Tea Party, not the Democrats, that are causing the trouble. At this point, the only hurdle left to a bipartisan deal, the only obstacle in the way, is the Tea Party. But for the Tea Party, we could have an agreement that reduces spending by a historic amount. We could have a deal that keeps the government open. A Tea Party rebellion may hurt the House Republican leadership politically, but a shutdown will hurt Americans, all Americans, much more. It's time for House Republican leaders to rip the Band-Aid off. Mr. Speaker, it's time to forget the Tea Party and take the deal. There are only 10 days left before the current CR expires. There is no new stopgap being prepared by House Republicans. It seems like the only viable proposal is the one the Speaker walked away from. So the Speaker faces a choice: return to the deal he was prepared to accept before the Tea Party rebelled last week, or risk a shutdown on April 8th. I think we know what the right answer is. It is clear. Speaker has a choice: appease the Tea Party and shut down the government, or take the right and principled stand and move the government forward by coming to a reasonable compromise between both parties that cuts the budget significantly. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Madam President, it feels a bit like deja vu standing here again today discussing the ongoing saga of the 1099 repeal. 2 weeks ago, I offered amendment number 161 to this small business bill. If you read all the press releases and the public statement, well, it appears that absolutely nobody could possibly oppose the repeal of the 1099 requirement in Section 9006 of the health care bill. Yet, once again, the other side is attempting to delay or derail the 1099 repeal by offering a second-degree amendment. Now, I might have been open to a second-degree amendment when we started this process many long months ago. But now we're approaching the one-year anniversary since we began fighting to repeal this unnecessary mandate. It has no place in the health care bill in the first place. I can't help but question why on earth we're still swinging and missing at this one. Is it a lack of support in my caucus? Well, the answer to that, Madam President, is no. The support amongst Republicans is absolutely unanimous. Lack of Republican support certainly has not held this up. I ask myself if there's a lack of bipartisan support that is holding the effort up. Well, the answer to that is also no. My colleague, the junior senator from West Virginia, has co-sponsored the last several versions of this repeal legislation here in the Senate. Together, Senator Manchin and I have secured dozens of Democrats who very strongly support the repeal. And 76 Democrats voted for this identical 1099 repeal in the House of Representatives. So bipartisan support is enormously, if not unusually, strong. So might our problem be a lack of support from the White House? Well, the answer to that is also no. The President has publicly called for a repeal of this 1099 mandate on several occasions in press conferences, and he even referenced it in his State of the Union address. Well, is it possible that there's still confusion about how our small businesses feel about the mandate? Well, that's not the case. The chorus of job creators opposing this mandate is almost deafening. The Chamber of Commerce, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, the American Farm Bureau Federation, and I could go on and on and on listing organizations that are arguing for its repeal. Has it been a controversial pay-for that has slowed down our progress? Well, interestingly enough, an almost identical budgetary offset passed this chamber, the United States Senate, unanimously just 4 months ago. Requiring someone to repay what was given to them erroneously, well, that's just plain and simple good government. Even Secretary of Health and Human Services Sebelius noted that repayment of improper subsidies is, quote, fair for recipients and all taxpayers, unquote. So arguments about the pay-for simply are hollow excuses to justify inaction. And our job creators are seeing it for what it really is. It's more nonsense. It astounds me that we can seemingly pass benchmark after benchmark without going over the finish line. How can we make so much important progress only to be stymied again and again by some silent opposition? My friends across the aisle have often complained about the slow pace of the Senate. They've blamed the other side of the aisle for preventing progress. Well, Madam President, my side of the aisle has been ready for a long, long time to repeal this job-killing mandate. I want you to know we stand ready to vote. Considering the high unemployment rates plaguing our country, it seems absolutely incomprehensible that we'd waste even another day without addressing this mandate in the health care bill. Our job creators have watched dueling amendments and proposals and counter-proposals. Well, that's gone on for a year. I first circulated a Dear Colleague letter asking for co-sponsors of this 1099 repeal in June of last year. And when we introduced it in July with 25 co-sponsors, well, small businesses cheered. It gave them hope that common sense would prevail in Congress and that partisanship is sometimes set aside to just simply do the right thing. But now they see that there is yet again a delay tactic in the form of a second-degree amendment to the 1099 repeal. They've been frustrated time and time again. When it failed to advance in September and November and appeared stalled well into the new year. But today we have a simple choice. We can pass my amendment with strong bipartisan support and demonstrate that we have the 60 votes necessary for the House version, or we can pass the second-degree amendment and push this repeal off into limbo, into never, never land yet again. We can actually fix the problem in a bipartisan way, or we can continue to kick this can down the road. If we pass the second-degree amendment, quite simply, what we have voted yes to do is delay the repeal of the 1099 amendment. And eventually, we are going to flirt with disaster on this, and it won't get done. We need to focus all of our energy on helping our job creators grow and create more jobs, not force them into worrying about hiring more accountants. Pardon my boldness here, but there is no reason to delay. An identical version of my amendment passed the House with large bipartisan support, 314 to 112. I urge my colleagues with all I have to oppose the second-degree amendment that my friend from New Jersey is proposing. Let's be clear here. This latest distraction from 1099 repeal is just that. It's distraction. We all know that it isn't really about a study to look at health care costs. If you want to do a study, put the amendment on some other piece of legislation. This is about derailing and delaying the 1099 repeal. Because if the second-degree amendment passes, it says, instead of sending this to the President to become law, we need to go back to the drawing board. While the proponents of the second-degree amendment will claim that it's innocuous, make no mistake, it's designed to obliterate this amendment because of a budgetary offset that, again, I remind us, a similar offset was passed unanimously recently by the Senate. Just like a Politico article from yesterday noted, and I'm quoting, Senate Democrats are working on an amendment that would kill the Republicans pay for in the future, unquote. If the second degree passes, then we are essentially adding nearly $25 billion to our debt over the next 10 years. While some may preach the virtues of pay-as-you-go rules, when it comes right down to it, they will undermine virtually any fiscal responsible pay-for. So here we are again crossing the same bridge that we have crossed so many times before. In fact, the Senate refused this idea when we rejected the Baucus Amendment that repealed 1099 but was not paid for. That amendment fell 23 votes short of passage because it just fiscally didn't make sense. So why are we still here aimlessly walking around in circles when we ought to be marching straight ahead? Why are we proposing to send this bipartisan legislation back to the House? Because that's what will have to happen, when it ought to go directly to the President's desk for signature. Our vote today can send a message that we have all the votes necessary to get this done and get it on the President's desk. And everybody can celebrate. Our job creators, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. The logic of the second-degree amendment is absolutely baffling. Here we are in the ninth inning, and somehow our pay-for has become magically unacceptable, even after a similar pay-for was used unanimously by the Senate before. Where were all the objections? Where was the demand for further study when we unanimously approved a similar offset for the doc fix legislation? Let me be very clear. A vote in favor of the second degree is a vote against our business and job creators. My amendment has been waiting for a vote for 14 days now, and the repeal has been pending for nearly a year. Isn't enough enough? The time for delay and further study must be over. Let's pass my amendment today by an overwhelming vote of the Senate. Let's reject the second degree. Let's get this piece of legislation to the President for his signature, and we can all celebrate. Small businesses, our job creators, deserve no less. Madam President, thank you. I yield the floor.
The Senator from Alabama.
Government funding is set to expire next week on April 8th. We're in the midst of a 2011 fiscal year that ends September 30th, and the Congress has only appropriated money through April 8th. If Congress does not act by that time, the government would shut down. Congress needs to act, but Congress needs to listen to the American people, listen to the financial experts that we have dealt with, and to reduce spending and reduce the surging debt that we have, the surging annual deficit that we face this year. Last predicted, I think, $1.6 trillion or so, maybe 1.5 now, the largest deficit in the history of the Republic. Nothing has ever been seen like it before, and it has got to be addressed. There's no way around it. So we've got this deadline hanging over our heads, and the reason is that my colleagues and the Democratic leadership here in the Senate won't agree to the kind of substantial but realistic spending reductions that the House of Representatives has sent to us. They've sent us a budget plan that I think will work. But what we hear is that the sky will fall if we trim the $61 billion from a $3.7 trillion budget, $3,700 billion that we spend. But if we reduce that spending by $61 billion, somehow this will cause the country to sink into oblivion. And American people know better than that. That is not realistic. Of course we can cut those kind of numbers out of this huge budget that we have, and the American people will be better off for it. As ranking member on the Budget Committee, we've looked at the numbers, and that $61 billion reduces the baseline of federal spending by 61, but over 10 years, because its baseline reduction would save $860 billion. This is the kind of small but significant step that does make a difference. People say, well, it doesn't make any difference. Well, why don't we just increase spending? Why don't we cut spending at all? Of course we've got to reduce spending. American people know that the borrowed money and overspending of the past 2 years have failed to produce what it promised. Instead, all that has been achieved through this massive surge in federal spending through the stimulus package and other programs is a crushing debt burden that weakens our economy and is a drag on our economy, as expert witnesses have told us. It threatens our economic future. Alan Simpson, former Republican Senator, Erskine Bowles, formerly the Chief of Staff to President Clinton, appointed by President Obama to co-chair the Debt Commission, the Fiscal Commission, reported to us, and jointly they submitted a written statement that said that if the United States fails to act, it faces, quote, the most predictable crisis in its most predictable economic crisis in its history, close quote. This is a real warning. And they said that such a crisis could arrive as soon as 1 or 2 years. People have been saying, oh, we're on the wrong track. If we don't get off of it 3 or 4 or 5 years, we're going to have a crisis. More and more people are warning us that that crisis is sooner. Mr. Bowles said a year, give or take a little bit, we'll have a crisis. Mr. Simpson said, I think within a year. The American people rightly expect their elected leaders to confront this threat with seriousness and candor, but the President has never once looked the American people in the eye and told them the truth about the financial crisis we face. Has he ever discussed those kind of words with the American people? That we face an actual crisis? We could have a debt problem that hit us very quickly, just like the one in 2007 that put us in a deep recession, and we're on a fragile recovery now. We need to keep that recovery going. The last thing we need to do is have another recession, some sort of other financial kickback, pushback, collapse that puts more people out of work and weakens an already struggling economy. It's not necessary that this occur. The President and his budget director have, instead of being truthful with us, falsely boasted to the American people that their budget, that under their budget, we will, quote, live within our means, close quote, and, quote, not add more to the debt, and that, quote, we're not going to spend any more money than we're taking in, close quote. He submitted his 10-year budget to the Congress, and that's what he says this does. But not one of those statements is true. Not one. When the budget was announced, Mr. Bowles, whom the President appointed to head the Debt Commission, said it's nowhere close to what we need to be doing to get our house in order. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office finds this, that our annual deficits never once fall below $748 billion. I was saying 600. Now the Congressional Budget Office has done an independent analysis of the President's budget, and they say the lowest single annual deficit in 10 years would be $748 billion. Well, is it going down, you ask? Then this budget going to put us living within our means and live on what we take in? Well, in the outer years, the deficits out 7, 8, 9, 10 years of the President's budget, they're going up, and in the 10th year, the deficit is $1.2 trillion, $1,200 billion deficit that year. And you might ask, well, what do those numbers mean? We take in about $3.7 trillion, we spend this year about $3.7 trillion through September 30th. We take in $2.2 trillion. This is why we're on an unsustainable path, and we've got to get off of it. It's not a partisan matter. It's a matter that we've got to face reality. We still have members of the Senate in denial, and we have the majority leader down here who might not get money for his cowboy poetry festival in Nevada. Give me a break. This country is heading in the path of great danger, and we need to turn around. Just imagine, if you would, the fate of a CEO if, in the process of asking for shareholders to buy company stock, he declared, quote, "We are not adding to our debt," close quote, while his accountants were telling him that the company's debt was on a path to double as our debt is. The President even nominated a budget director, Heather Higginbottom, who has no budget experience, deputy director, who attempted to defend these claims before the Budget Committee last week. I don't know. Maybe they couldn't find anybody that would take the job with experience. The best I can tell, she's never had a single business course or an economics course, never managed any kind of organization or budget, ever. Majored, I think, in political science and campaigned for President Obama and Senator John Kerry. We need some seriousness here. And we in Congress are not stepping up to the plate, frankly. We're not taking the kind of decisive action needed to curb our rising debt. And the majority leader, our good friend Senator Reid, which is a tough job, I got to tell you. It's a tough job. But now he's saying that the problem is there's a division within the Republican Party. You see, you've got these extremists over here, new Republicans that got elected last election, promising to do something about spending, and they're out of touch, you see. They're extremists, and there's some good Republicans over here that they've been here a long time, and, you know, we know how to get along and cut deals, and we're going to take care of this thing, and you just got to keep these people under control. But I might remind the leader that every single Republican either voted for the $61 billion in cuts or called for more cuts. There's no division in the Republican Party about the need to have reasonable and significant reductions in expenditures. There's an essentially unanimous Republican agreement we ought to cut $61 billion or more from this year's discretionary budget. By contrast, the majority leader lost nearly one-fifth of his caucus on his proposal, which was basically to do nothing, cut $4 billion, I think, reduce spending by $4 billion. 10 members or more defected. They knew that wasn't enough, even under pressure from the President and from the majority leader. So it's clear where the momentum lies, and I just want to repeat again, though, this is not and cannot be seen as a partisan squabble. The chairman of the Federal Reserve talked to us a few weeks ago, and he submitted a written statement to the Budget Committee, and this is what Mr. Bernanke said. He talked about the Congressional Budget Office debt projections. I've made some reference to those and how dangerous they show our path to be. This is what Mr. Bernanke said. The CBO projections, by design, ignore the adverse effects that such high debt and deficits would likely have on our economy. But if the government debt and deficits were actually to grow at the pace envisioned in this scenario, the economic and financial effects would be severe. Diminishing confidence on the part of investors that deficits will be brought under control would likely lead to sharply rising interest rates on government debt and potentially to broader financial turmoil. Moreover, high rates of government borrowing would both drain funds away from capital private formation and increase our foreign indebtedness with adverse long-term effects on U.S. output, incomes, and standard of living. He goes on to say, it is widely understood that the federal government is on an unsustainable path. Yet as a nation, we have done little to address this critical threat to our economy. Doing nothing will not be an option indefinitely. The longer we wait to act, the greater the risk and the more wrenching the inevitable changes on the budget will be. By contrast, the prompt adoption of a credible program to reduce future deficits would not only enhance economic growth and stability in the long run, but would also yield substantial near-term benefits now in terms of lower long-term interest rates and increased consumer and business confidence. Close quote. This is the head of the Federal Reserve, the man most, I guess, supposedly knowledgeable about the economy of the United States of America. We're not making this up. So we have a proposal from our Democratic majority in the Senate to do nothing. Basically, to do zero, nada. And this kind of warning we've got, we are living in a fantasy world if we don't think we can cut $61 billion from this budget. My friend, John McMillan, just elected the Director of Agriculture and Industries in Alabama, is facing a critical crisis in his department. I just saw the headline in the paper. He has 200 employees. He had 200 employees. He's going to have to lay off 60 of them. Cities and counties are doing this kind of thing all over the country. You think the state of Alabama will cease to exist if that happens? It's too much. I hope, it's sad that they've got that kind of challenge before them. We don't have to do that much right now, but if we took those kind of steps, something significant, we could make a bigger difference than a lot of people realize in the debt that we're facing. Of course, Governor Cuomo in New York and Christie in New Jersey and Brown in California and others all over the country are making real significant alterations in their level of spending while we worry about protecting the Cowboy Poetry Festival in Nevada. And remember this, people have forgotten this, and since President Obama took office, discretionary spending on our federal programs in Congress have increased 24%. We didn't have the money for that. We never should have increased spending that much. It was a big error. But you know what they said? Don't worry, we're making investments in the future. But you got to have money to make investments. If you don't have money, how can you make investments? All of this increase was borrowed. We're in huge debt, and when you increase spending, you have to borrow the money to increase spending. Every penny is borrowed. We did an $800 billion stimulus package. Every penny was borrowed. We'll pay $30 billion plus a year interest on that borrowed money for as long as I'm alive, and longer, no doubt. There's no plan to pay that debt off. And I know people are talking and they're working out. They say they're going to try to reach a compromise so we don't have to shut the government down, and I certainly hope that's true. But I do not believe that we need any tax and spend compromise. And I will not support that. And I don't think the American people will support it either. They know we spend too much. They know we've ramped up spending $800 billion with a stimulus package, that discretionary spending has gone up 24% in 2 years. And they know we can reduce federal spending without this country sinking into the ocean. And that's what they expect us to do. That's what governors are doing, mayors are doing, county commissioners are doing, all over my state, all over America. We've got to recognize that Washington is spending too much, not taxing too little. How can we ask Americans to pay more in taxes when Washington is not even willing to cut $61 billion from our bloated bureaucracy? So I have a proposition from my colleagues who wish to raise taxes before we consider asking the American people to pay another cent in taxes. Why don't we first drain every cent of waste from the federal bureaucracy? We will never truly dig ourselves out of this crisis and put this nation on a real path to prosperity unless we bring our spending under control. America's strength is not measured by the size of our government, but the scope of our freedoms and the vigor and vitality of the American people and their willingness to invest and work hard for the future. That's what makes us strong. Endless spending, taxing, and borrowing is a certain path to decline. And we're on that path today, and we must get off it. So we know the threat. We know what we need to do. The economy is trying to rebound. So let's take some good steps today. Let's pass this $61 billion reduction in spending this fiscal year. It will amount to about $860 billion over 10 years. It will be a very significant first step. That's what's before us today, not the other issues. We have got to decide what we're going to do about funding the government between now and September 30th. That's the rest of this fiscal year. Let's take a firm step on that. Let's begin to look at what we're going to do for next year's budgets and what we're going to do about our surging entitlement programs that are on an unsustainable course. We can do all those things and leave our country healthy and vigorous and prosperous for the future. I truly believe that that's the kind of thing that we need to be doing now. So I am really baffled that we don't know why that the President is not leading more. He's not talking directly to the American people about why this is important. Is it just a political squabble and the President sitting here and going to Rio and talking about Libya? Or is it true, as Mr. Bernanke says, we are on an unsustainable path? Or is it true that Mr. Erskine Bowles, the President's own director of the Fiscal Commission, says that we are facing the most predictable economic crisis in this country's history, and said it could happen within 2 years? Are we making this up? American people get it. They tell me, what's going on in Washington? You've got to get your house in order. That's what this past election was about. People understand we need some action and some leadership here, but we're not getting it. I just truly believe if we could get together and if we could get a bipartisan effort to look at this $61 billion, we could disagree on how to reduce that spending. Maybe the Republicans have this idea and Democrats have that. Let's work all that out. But let's reach an agreement that actually reduces spending by enough to make a difference, that the world would say, wow, now the Congress over here is beginning to take some steps. That was a nice, good, strong first step. Now, if they'll stay on that path, maybe the United States is going to get on the road to prosperity again and stay out of this dangerous debt crisis area that we're in today and get on the right path to prosperity. This country is ready to grow. It's ready to rebound. It just needs a clear signal from Washington, in my opinion. American leaders, those of us in this Congress, have no higher duty, no greater moral responsibility than to take all appropriate steps to protect the good people we serve from the clear and present danger we face. It's time to get busy about it, Madam President, and I believe that if we act strongly and with clarity, the American people not only will support it, but they will be happy with it, and it will make a positive difference for our country. And would thank the President and would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.